Hey, what's up guys? Darkbreaker here. Today's video is sponsored by wildstats.gg. Up your game with the first personal performance analytics platform for wildrift. You can check out all of those amazing players in your own leaderboard and see what champions they are using, what's their win rate, what's their KDA, what's the win rate on their best champion. You can see which champions are the best in high-low if you guys are there, and if not, you can also check out the European champion leaderboard for each champion, which champion has a certain win rate for each rank, plus in-depth stats for all your games and a rank points graph to see your progress when you check your own profile. And let's hop right into it. Darkbreaker here, aka Professor Breaker, and in today's video, the new tier list for patch 3.1B. Dude, first of all I have to say, I was already recording this gameplay, this tier list. I was already recording this tier list for 1 hour, and the file is corrupted, so I have to redo it. I'm fucking dying inside. So if you guys appreciate my effort to redo this tier list for you guys, so you guys can see what champions are the best in this patch, then definitely leave a like on this video, because wow, I'm kind of devastated. I think I talked more than 1 hour for this tier list, and now redoing everything, I'm dying inside. Wow. Anyways, first of all, explanation about tier list. My tier list is a subjective tier list based on a challenger's opinion. I'm a challenger player, so I'm giving you guys my opinion as a challenger player, what champions I think are good right now in the current meta on my server. And I also asked other people on their opinion, other pro players on their opinion about their respective role, what they think is good. So I'm always reaching out to other people to collect data, basically, or informations, what they think is hot or good. So that's what I'm basing it off a lot of times, so you guys can understand. And anyways, this is an orientation, so you guys can orientate yourself and see, okay, is this good? I can try this out and make it work, and it's probably easier to make it work than other champions. If you guys enjoy other champions that are lower in my tier list, then you can still make them work, but doesn't make, or I mean, it's probably make it harder than if you play one of those OP picks that just broken. But yeah, if you guys don't want to miss out on any future content, daily content, other tier lists, patch 3.2 is coming out pretty soon with a lot of content, then definitely make sure to subscribe and activate notifications. But enough talking about this stuff, and let's get started with the Baron Lane tier list. First of all, Jace right now. Wow, I feel tired because I already did everything and I have to redo. Wow, I'm so sad. Jace is amazing on this new patch thanks to the Humus buff. Also, Fiora got nerfed, so you just absolutely demolish her. He's an amazing counter to Fiora, just hard-pulling her. If people play Fiora, go for Jace. Jace is probably the greatest counter against Fiora right now in a 1vs1 Baron lane. He has tons of damage. He has the range advantage to bully people that are melee. He has the hammer form and a cannon form, so he can switch between range and melee form, doing tons of damage. And teamfight wise, once you have 3 items, he provides amazing poke damage that just does so much damage. And in the laning phase, he's also very good. That's why I put him S+ tier this time. Darius. You guys, or I mean a lot of you guys have said to me Darius is not that strong anymore because he got nerfed. But you guys need to understand patch notes. You guys need to understand what changes mean or how much impact they will have. Because Darius got nerfed, yes. It's a 1% nerf per level. And in the late game, it's a 14% nerf in total on his attack speed. But remember, 14% attack speed is how much gold in value? It's pretty much a dagger, and a dagger costs like 500. So, and dagger provides more attack speed than 40%. So, it's not that big of a nerf in the late game. And remember, in the early mid game, he's pretty much almost the same. And if you guys feel like in the late game you struggle with attack speed, you can just change the build and go for Trinity Force instead of Black Cleaver. But overall, he still has tons of damage. He has Noxus Might to boost his AD. He has the first ability that provides so much healing and does a lot of damage. He still has the ultimate to dunk people and do true damage. So overall, he's still amazing at carrying games 1 versus 9. Next one is going to be Set. Yes, they slightly nerfed Set. Oh, I've got to say, I marked champions with a star that moved in the tier list, or they got changed on this patch. So if you guys are wondering, for example, Fiora has a star that means she moved down, or she moved in general in this tier list in comparison to last tier list. Set, even though he got nerfed, is just a slight early game nerf, but he's still amazing in team fights. He's still a good split pusher and a great duelist, and he provides tons of crowd control and also has amazing damage thanks to his second ability, which grants him a shield and does true damage. Third ability pulls people. You can use Protobelt as a playmaking tool in combination with the third ability to pull people. And the ultimate does tons of damage and provides crowd control as well. Camille is a great split pusher, and now with Divine Sunrush, she becomes really good at she becomes one of the most consistent Baron laners in this game right now. Good in team fights, good split pusher, great duelist. So that's why I have her in S+ tier. Next one is gonna be Renekton. Renekton is still one of the best Baron laners, a very early game strong dominant champion that has tons of damage, has crowd control with a stun, has dashing abilities, and the ultimate that makes him even more tanky. So he is a tanky, strong duelist who is also good in team fights. Yeah, let me drink a bit. I already talked for 1 hour, guys. Oh my god, my throat. Okay, next one. Garen. Garen is a solid tanky champion that provides good damage and is a great duelist. If you guys are beginners in the Baron lane, then definitely try to play Garen because he's easy to play and he is overall a very solid pick. Riven, a great duelist in the early game, great at snowballing. In team fights, she can do good work and carry games super hard thanks to her AoE knockup, AoE stun, and AoE ultimate doing tons of damage. But she definitely is kind of reliant to snowball in the early game. Plus, if you guys are facing the wrong team comp, in this case the opponents have a lot of crowd control, you might struggle to be effective in team fights. Plus, you also need to snowball in the early game usually to become really useful. So if your bot lane is feeding and you are not snowballing as a Riven, then you probably won't win the game. Next one is going to be Wukong. Wukong is a solid laner that has good damage in the laning phase. He has also good sustain if you go Divine Sunra, so he is a great duelist with Divine Sunra plus Black Cleaver. In team fights, he provides a lot of value thanks to his ultimate that can knock people up. Oh, I don't even need this one anymore. But I feel like he just gets outscaled and he doesn't do that much damage in team fights, so he's just a solid S tier. Aurelia is becoming a hot pick this patch on a lot of roles, not only Baron lane but also jungle and mid lane. She's a solid S tier in this case just because she has good playmaking potential, good 1-9 carry potential. She can fall off in the late game, but the combination that she has right now of Blade of the Ruined King, Death Dance, and Divine Sunra makes her super strong. I'm gonna explain it later for the mid lane better. So I'm just gonna put her S tier because she does struggle against certain matchups as well. So that's why just S tier. And she's kind of snowball reliant at the same time. And high skill ceiling. Next one is gonna be Gragas. A solid, consistent pick in the top lane that you can build a full AP You can build him hybrid or go full tank as well, and he provides decent crowd control. So that's why I put him S tier. Plus, if you guys need AP damage in the Baron lane, you can go for Gragas. Next one is going to be another AP Baron laner. In this case, it's going to be Diana. Diana is a great duelist that can hold the lane pretty well, and she does tons of damage both in the laning phase as well as in team fights thanks to her ultimate and thanks to her scaling. She's just very good at carrying games 1 vs 9. Champions that I put as plus tier are usually either broken, so they are great at carrying games 1 vs 9, and they also have too much damage. They usually have too much damage, or other case they have way too much utility that make them super valuable. Next one is gonna be Jax. Jax is a great split pusher that is in the end really weak in the early game against a lot of matchups. So he struggles in the early game, but once you have 3 items, you're scaling, he can become an absolute strong carry beast. Also, not only as a duelist to split push, but also in team fights, he can be pretty valuable thanks to his third ability that can stun people and the ultimate that makes him really tanky because he's getting resistance from the ultimate. Next one is gonna be Shen. I'm putting Shen S tier because he provides decent utility. He has playmaking potential with his taunt. He has the global ultimate to join team fights to get the team an advantage. But he's weak in the early game and his laning phase is not the best. And he's getting outscared by a lot of champions that will just push him in and he can't join team fights as easily. And also, since he's a tank, he's really relying on his teammates to be useful. And if they are not, he can't carry games 1 vs 9 since he's just a tank. Next one is going to be Nasus. Wait, I need to double check. Oh, I'm going to cry if it's cancelled. Okay, it's not. Next one is going to be Nasus. Nasus is early game decent and late game an absolute beast. So level 8 plus, he becomes super strong in the 1 vs 1, beating almost every champion that doesn't have true damage. But I feel like his playstyle is not the best for solo queue because you are kind of forced to always farm up and stay in your lane. And if you don't, you lose potential on your damage and potential on your carry potential. So if your bot lane is doing bad and they're feeding, you can't really join team fights early on because you also want to focus on farming up and getting stacks. But if your bot lane is feeding and you can't join, then you will just lose the game. So yes, he needs a lot of time to scale, but if you don't have scaling time because your bot lane is feeding or the whole map is losing, then what can you do? Other champions, if they win in the early game, which they do because they're strong early game laners and they still have scaling factor, those champions can join teamfights and can impact the game earlier on than a Nasus that needs to scale, that needs to be level 8 plus, and then he has the teleport maybe and then he can join. Next one is gonna be Fiora. It hurts my heart, but Fiora only 8 tier now. I think a strong 8 tier maybe. The range nerf definitely hurts her early game a lot and also her teamfight power. Because it's harder for her to reach people and it's harder for her to chase people down because the first ability range got reduced by -1. On top of that, you are kind of forced to be a full-time split pusher at this point. If you don't split push, your value in teamfights is not that good. And you usually, beforehand, she was very good at carrying games because she's snowballing early on, getting a lot of gold, and then from that on, she snowballs and then impacts the map and she's still good in teamfights. But now, she won't snowball as hard anymore. She's much weaker in the early game. And in teamfights, she's not that good. So you are forced to only split push. But other champions can do a much better job, like a Jax or a Camille, that are very good. Camille, good in the early game, good in teamfights, and good as a duelist. While a Fiora just doesn't do as much anymore. She's just a split push champion. So that's why I just put the 80, and Her early game is so much weaker because of the range nerf. Even though, yes, they buffed the vitals, you just don't have the range anymore to hit the vitals consistently as before and zone people and bully them completely. Akshan, a situational pick that can be good against melee champions, but he can also get punished by the jungler super hard since he is squishy and a ranged champion. Graves. I feel like Graves is solid, but he is also kind of one-dimensional, that you are just a split pusher that isn't that good in teamfights, and you need a lot of gold to make him work. First of all, I would say he's high skill ceiling to make him work, plus he needs a lot of gold to get to be valuable. He can be good against a few champions because of his range advantage. So if you play Grace against Fiora, you probably bully her completely now. But yeah, solid 8 here. Yasuo, why do I put him 80 in the Baron lane? Yes, he might struggle against a few matchups because he is not that good against some juggernauts, like a Darius, for example. But his value in teamfights is just amazing if you have the right team comp. Let's say Alistair, Rakan, Malphite, any knockups, Wukong. In combination, Yasuo is just so good for the teamfight value. If you don't die early game on, you have 3 items. He does a lot of damage and he can do very well in those team fights. Next one is gonna be Olaf. Olaf is good to counter tanks and to counter team comps that rely on crowd control, and yeah, that's about it. But he's kind of cheesy in the early game. He might struggle. Like, if you don't cheese early game on, you lose later on in the lane against a lot of champions. Akali, great team fighter, great assassin, is good at carrying games, but she is weak in the early game against a lot of matchups. Cannon doesn't provide as much damage as I would want to on him, and he is also not the greatest lane bully. If you guys want to play a ranged champion that is super strong, both in the lane as in teamfights, then go for Jace, for example. And also, if you guys want an AP champion that has way more teamfight value, then you can just go for Diana instead, or Gragas, that is simpler, easier to play, and still has consistent value compared to Cannon. Cannon is also very squishy, so you can punish him pretty easily. Jarvan. Jarvan is a solid tank that provides great crowd control, and he can hold his lane pretty well. Pantheon can be a good duelist in the early game to snowball and then impact the map, but he falls off super hard, and once you fall off and you don't snowball in the early game, you become pretty useless. Tryndamere is weak in the early game against a lot of matchups, and he struggles in teamfights if the opponents have crowd control, and that's why I just put him 8 here. But he does have the ultimate to tank a lot, to survive for a long time, and he skates like a truck after 3 items plus. Okay, let's continue with Malphite. Malphite is a champion that is really not that... I mean, he's still okay, thanks to his ultimate, but being a tank in this meta where everyone is building Divine Sandra, where the more HP you have, the more damage they will do and the more healing they will get, Divine Sandra becomes an amazing item against a champion like Malphite, and it's hard for Malphite to hold the lane against those champions, let's say Camille, Darius, etc. And the main issue is, if you want to join the team fight, you will lose to turret. And once you come back to your lane, you can never hold the lane anymore. They have too much gold. They just beat you up 1v1, and they will just perma shove you in. So if you roam, you will lose even more and more. So it's very hard for you to join those team fights and be impactful using your ultimate in those team fights if you're facing a champion that is completely outscaling you, and he will just be able to dive you, even though you're building tanky. Same applies for Dr. Mundo, but Dr. Mundo might be a bit stronger in the 1v1, but he doesn't provide anything for those team fights in comparison for Malphite that at least has the ultimate. Dr. Mundo has just the cleaver, and everyone is building Enter here right now, so I'm just putting him 8 here. Same applies for Alistair as well, that everyone is building Divine Sandra, so makes it hard for Alistair to work in the Baron lane, or you can still make him work, but you kind of get pushed in always, so it's harder for you to roam. Singed in the early game is really weak, but his scaling is super good. So once you get a few items, Singed can be a tanky, damage dealing playmaker thanks to Proto Belt and his fling. And if you use second ability onto someone, they can't even use any dash or dash abilities or flash. Vayne. Vayne has range in the Baron lane, so she is very good in the 1v1 against a lot of champions, beating majority of Baron laners, and he can bully them. But the downside of Vayne and Lucian is that even though they can win 1v1s, they can bully the Baron laner in the early game, they can hard scale. If you get bullied, if you get ganked and bullied by the enemy jungler, if their goal is to make you suffer, then you will suffer and you go 0-5 and you can't do anything. So it's really up to your jungler to protect you or pray that the enemy jungler doesn't perma gank you. Kayle, very similar scenario, that you are super squishy, you are very weak in the early game, you get bullied against almost every champion in the top tier Baron lane right now. And on top of that, you're super squishy and it's easy to dive you and camp you, make you go 0-5 and be completely useless. You need 3-4 items and be level 15 or something. Next one is gonna be Rengar. Rengar is really weak. He struggles against most matchups and it's kind of troll to go him in the Baron lane. Just go use him in the jungle. Teemo is pretty weak. He's not that lane dominant as you guys would expect, because they nerfed him a lot. Plus, people are running Sunrod, so they have a lot more sustain than beforehand. And he gets outscaled and he can never hold people 1v1. They're just all killing him 1v1. And Teemo doesn't provide too much value in team fights on top of that. So let's move on into the jungle tier list. For the jungle tier list, S+ tier is Nunu. Nunu is a ganking machine that can gank left and right, is super tanky, provides a lot of crowd control, and is amazing in team fights. Olaf is a 1 vs 9 hyper carry beast that has good jungle clear, decent ganking potential, and he can ignore crowd control and run people down, doing tons of damage. Very good at carrying games 1 vs 9. Evelynn works super well in the jungle right now, in low elo and in high elo, because people don't respect this champion and don't respect her ganking potential and don't respect her invisibility. She can be every time you're too overextended, she can be there lurking around and boom, you're dead. Ganking left, ganking mid, ganking bot lane, ganking bot lane, always 2 free kills, going back to mid lane, and so on and so on. If people are playing overextended, Evelynn is super good at snowballing and just one-shotting you. The moment she gets a few kills, she becomes so strong that she just one-shots you. Lee Sin is a ganking machine with a new build that you can use with Divine Sandra and Yumus getting buffed. Lee Sin becomes even better. Great ganking potential, great carry potential, and good 1 vs 9 potential. And just ganking left and right everywhere and super strong in a 1 vs 1 skirmish in the early game as well. He can invade, which not a lot of champions can do without getting not punished like a Lee Sin. Lee Sin can go invade and he has the mobility to get out as well. Kha'Zix is a great assassin with tons of damage and great carry potential. Camille, I talked with Vex and he said he would put Camille high S tier, and I have to say that I kind of agree that she isn't the greatest in the early game and she doesn't have the best jungle clear. She obviously can carry games 1 vs 9, but her ganking potential in the early game is not that great and she really needs the ultimate to get started. She can counter, she's pretty good at countering Olaf though, to be fair. Xin Zhao right now, I put a star on him just because I want to move him into the high S tier, a strong S tier. Camille, Xin Zhao, strong S tier. Because this champion, in combination with Divine Sandra, Black Cleaver, Death Dance, Derek's Gage, is super strong, doing tons of damage, and is still tanky, has good ganking potential, and his ultimate just makes him very hard to kill. Jace with the Humus buff, pretty good in the jungle, doing tons of damage, good in skirmishes, and decent at ganking. Irelia is a hot pick for a lot of pro players in the jungle right now. A lot of pro players are playing her and making her work just because she is so strong in this patch with the Divine Sandra doing tons of damage. So that's why she is S tier right now. Vi, really solid champion doing tons of damage, good ganking potential, good in team fights, decent frontliner as well. Graves, kind of slow when it comes to ganking and scaling. Like, he needs to scale, but once he gets going, has 3 items, he becomes really good at carrying games 1 vs 9 thanks to his crit damage, doing tons of damage and just one-shotting people left and right. Jax also kinda... And also, Grace is not the best ganker in the early game. Jax is pretty good in the late game, is a hyper carry, obviously, one of the best late game champions, but he needs to get to that point. His jungle clear speed is decent, not the greatest. His ganking potential is okay, but yeah, he just has the scaling. He's very good at carrying games 1 vs 9. Jarvan, on the other hand, is a strong tank at every stage. He's good at ganking and he does good damage in the early game. And he provides a lot in teamfights. Being a frontliner, having crowd control, can lock people up. Rengar is a great assassin, snowballing champion, doing tons of damage, can one-shot people left and right. But I just feel like he doesn't have the same consistency as other junglers. And he's like more like, you go all in, and it's hard for you to escape afterwards. Like, because you kind of have to commit. Riven is good at snowballing the game, has tons of damage, and great carry potential. Just against a few team compositions, she might struggle if they have too much crowd control. Darius, I mean, even though he got nerfed, he still has tons of damage. He's decent ganker. His jungle clear speed is not that bad, and he has great carry potential. Against certain team comps, obviously he might struggle, but that a lot of champions will struggle against certain team comps if they have too much crowd control or too much mobility. Next one is going to be Gregor's jungle. Gregor's jungle full AP is amazing, even in the early game. Considering that he is more like a scaling champion, scaling poking champion. Once he has 3 items, he is amazing. But he's also in the early game not bad at skirmishes, at scuttle. Plus his ganking potential, thanks to his dash, is not that bad because he can knock people. He can stun them with a dash, and then he has the ultimate to push people towards your teammates as well. So he has good playmaking potential and amazing poking damage in the mid and late game. Fiora just A tier right now. She moved down from, I think I had her S tier or maybe even S plus tier last time. The range nerf just hurts in the jungle a lot because it makes it harder for you to gank people, to reach them, and also to chase people down because of the range nerf. Diana is A tier. She is a solid jungler, has good damage, doesn't have the greatest jungle clear, might not have the greatest ganks because she doesn't have core control until she's level 5. But their carry potential in teamfights is amazing because she does tons of damage. Next one is going to be Morgana. She is more like a utility-based jungler. She has good jungle clear speed. She is okay-ish ganks because she is really reliant to hit the binds. So if you don't hit the bind, the opponent is probably going to escape. And she doesn't provide the greatest damage in teamfights because she's more like utility, binding people down or stunning them. Wukong is damage-wise not that good, I would say. He can gank decently, and obviously has the ultimate for teamfights. But I feel like he's kind of reliant on his teammates to do damage once you're using the ultimate. because he doesn't do that much damage, and he's not like the crazy 1 vs 9 champion, because he's, like I said, really reliant on his teammates to do damage for you while you're knocking them up. Pantheon is a great early game jungler that can gank and snowball, but he's falling off in the mid and late game. You can start 5-0, but if the game is too long or the other champions are scaling, then he's falling off, and you might be 5-0 early game, but you still end up losing if the game goes to 15 minutes, for example. Master Yi, 40% damage nerf on the first ability is a huge nerf for Master Yi, and that's why he's only B tier right now. His jungle clear speed got nerfed in 3.1A, and now his first ability damage got a giga nerf, 40% damage nerf on that first ability. In the, I mean, the more AD you have, it's just minus 40%. Like, instead of 100% scaling, you only have 60% scaling. I'm moving Rammus, Amumu, and Shyvana up because of the scuttle changes. I think it makes them a little bit more viable because they can just go for full clear instead of trying to contest for the scuttle and maybe lose the scuttle fight and get snowballed on. Rammus has the issue that his jungle clear speed is really bad and he needs to get a few kills in the early game and snowball. Also, since he's a tank, he's reliant on his teammates to do damage for him. If the teammates are bad, then he can't carry. And like I said, his jungle clear speed is very bad, so he can't farm. He will always have low gold. If you're playing Rammus, usually you will have always low gold, unless you're getting a lot of kills in the early game and get items, so your jungle clear speed is getting accelerated at least a little bit. Amumu is not that tanky and doesn't have that much damage. He does only have the ultimate as his only valuable thing. Like, he's just an ultimate bot, so that's why I don't like him. And he gets punished by a lot of early game junglers in the early game because he can't fight anything. He's just too weak early on. Shyvana, on the other hand, is really reliant on her teammates to help her out at dragon because she needs those dragons. On top of that, her ganking potential is not that great. She is decent at counter ganking, to be fair. Zed, his jungle clear speed is pretty bad right now after the nerfs. He is a decent ganker and obviously he provides decent value in team fights thanks to his third ability and his ultimate. Zed has a fling that is great at making plays happen. His jungle clear speed is not that bad, and he's really good at ganking people because he can use the second ability, and within the second ability they can't use any dashing abilities and they can't fling. And you can use Protobelt and fling to catch people, so his ganks and playmaking potential is pretty good. Plus, late game he's an absolute monster and becomes kinda unkillable, doing tons of damage at the same time. I played him in Challenger Elo recently because I really didn't want to win with Unban Me DB, and I just went a Cinch, and I went 6-0 as a Cinch jungle, but I still lost. Feels bad, man. Next one is gonna be Fizz. He is a good assassin that can one-shot people, and he has decent playmaking potential, catching people with the ultimate. His jungle clear is really bad, and he becomes super low in the jungle, so that's why it's just P tier. Tryndamere, bad jungle clear speed, not that good at ganking. He has damage, he has good scaling, but he also struggles against certain team comps that have a lot of crowd control. Dr. Mundo, bad jungle clear speed. He is also not good at ganking, and he's just a mid shield that just throws cleaves. That's about it. Shen, also very bad jungle clear speed, so those champions will struggle to have a lot of gold, and you need gold to carry games, to have a lot of items and then be strong. But if you have bad jungle clear speed, you are really reliant to get a few kills here and there to kind of snowball, but if you don't, you can't really farm up because your jungle clear speed is just too bad. Obviously, Shen has the taunt, but he's also not that tanky. I don't know. As a tank, you're also relying on your teammates to carry you in comparison to like a Olaf who just 1 vs 9s for free. That's why I just hit you. Now let's move on to the mid lane. Karma is one of the most broken mid laners right now. She provides, she has tons of utility Thanks to her second ability, her ultimate, and her third ability, giving you a shield, can root people, can pull them together, AoE pull them, the donut thing, tons of poking damage as well with low cooldown. Diana does tons of damage. She is a great duelist at the same time, and she is good at carrying games 1 vs 9. That's why she's still broken since Horizon Cup, where people already started spamming her. Katarina, one of the best snowboarding champions, great at carrying games 1 vs 9. You get one reset, you just kill everyone. In low elo, she's absolutely amazing. Even in high elo, you can make her work if you're good at her. You get one reset, even if you're behind, you just wipe the enemy team. Pentakill, pentakill, pentakill. Yeah, people just don't CC her, and if you don't get CC'd, you just kill them all. Because every time someone dies, all of your cooldowns are getting resetted or lowered. Aurelia right now, I put her S+ tier if you are skilled on her. Yes, she is broken because you have Blade of the Rune King, Death Dance, Divine Sandra that have insane synergy and give Aurelia tons of sustain and amazing stats. And if you're skilled on her, you are you're great as a duelist, you're great as a playmaker, you are also good at carrying games 1 vs 9, but even in the late game, you don't fall off that much anymore. You're just because of Divine Sorrow providing you with a percentage HP damage and healing on top of having Blade of the Rune King percentage damage, and you just have so much mixed damage. Your passive magical damage, Blade of the Rune King magical damage, Divine Sunrow percentage physical damage on top of that. So you have a lot of percentage damage when you play Aurelia, and you have so much sustain. Blade of the Rune King lifesteal and Divine Sandra sustain as well. Yasuo S+ tier. If you are good on Yasuo, he is an absolutely goated playmaking machine. Thanks to his tornadoes, thanks to his ultimate, and in the right team comp, he can just win team fights very easily. Like Rakan knock up into Yasuo Yasuo ultimate, everyone just dies. He has tons of damage, and once you have 3 items, it's just pretty much GG if you're good on him. And he can just kite people. He has the Wit Wall that can block projectiles as well. Lucian got buffed. His Q cooldown got lowered by 1 second. Also, he has good mobility. He has tons of damage. Next one, Ziggs and Orianna both are great poking champions that are amazing in teamfights and do tons of damage. Fizz is a great assassin. Yeah, Fizz is a great assassin that can snowball the game and one-shot people left and right. He is also a great duelist. He can catch people with the ultimate. Akali works better in the mid lane because she doesn't have that many bad matchups in comparison to the Baron lane. Also, it's easier for you to roam and impact the map. Plus, she is amazing as an assassin in teamfights to one-shot people and just do tons of damage. Galio is a champion that provides you with a lot of utility, having the AoE taunt plus the global ultimate to join teamfights and knock people up. Plus, he has good poking damage at the same time. So he's very good in more teamfight-based team compositions. Twisted Fate, on the other hand, he's good at picking off people left and right using the ultimate to snowball on the map. With the global ultimate, he can gank top lane, then bot lane, top lane, bot lane, top lane, and then impact the map and snowball. Plus, he has crowd control thanks to his gold card plus red card. Jace. Jace is a good poking champion doing tons of damage, and Humus makes him even better. Plus, he is good as a duelist in the laning phase 1 vs 1. He is very obnoxious. If you are a melee champion facing Jace, you will have problems. Zed is still an amazing assassin doing tons of damage, great split pusher, and great duelist, and in teamfights he can pick off ranged champions or key targets with his ultimate. Akshan is a champion that is very good in the laning phase thanks to his range advantage. He almost wins against most champions in the laning phase. He has tons of damage because he's a crit champion. So if you have 3 items, he will do amazing damage. Plus, he has the revive. If you kill someone that killed one of your teammates, then that person is getting revived. And this can be a game changer in the late game in team fights. Plus, whenever you kill someone, you have your heroic swing to dash in. If you kill someone, you can dash out, so you can kite people at the same time. You have invisibility to roam and gank as well. Ari is a great playmaking champion or playmaking assassin that is good in the laning phase, has good poking damage, good duelist that she can beat a lot of champions 1v1 because of her 3 dashes plus her charm, and she can pick off people thanks to her charm, and can her charm is pretty much a game changer. If you can pick people off before a team fight with her charm, that person is pretty much dead. Next one is gonna be Corki. He is, I think I moved him up. Let's put a star because I moved him up. Why? He might struggle against a few assassins, but his teamfight potential is just too good. He has too much damage, and his package in teamfights, because everyone wants to flip for dragons, everyone wants those dragon fiestas, Corki is one of the best champions in a dragon teamfight thanks to his package that can zone people, slow them down, and do tons of damage. Aurelion Sol is a great teamfighting champion that can roam and gank left and right. That's why I put him A tier. In the laning phase, he might struggle against a lot of champions, but his teamfight, if people are starting Baron or Dragon and you join with a star and you stun them all, do tons of damage, then you guys will see why Aurelion Sol is so good. Also, his roaming potential is pretty good as well, like one of the best roamers. Garen is a solid tank that you can't underestimate in the mid lane because he has tons of damage and also has tons of sustain. So he's a good frontliner if you guys need physical damage in the mid lane. Brand is a champion that does good damage in the mid lane, but his roaming factor is really not that good and he's really squishy, so he might struggle against a lot of assassins just because he's so squishy. Morgana, as a mid laner, I mean, her wave clear is not that good. Her roaming potential is okay-ish. Her teamfight is good because she has the bind, she has the ultimate, so that's why I just put her A tier. I feel like her early game is just too weak and she can't really roam against a lot of matchups. Who will just snowball much more than a Morgana who has to sit in her lane? Veigar is a really scaling champion. I know he got buffed. In the late game he becomes very good, but he is A, doesn't have mobility, B, his horizon is not that reliant, and he needs to scale a lot and he's just so squishy. So in the laning phase he will struggle against a lot of matchups. Plus he can't roam because his wave clear in the early game is bad, and everyone is just gonna push you in, then roam and impact the map while you're just sitting and trying to stack up. Gragas is a solid mid laner that has decent poke and playmaking potential, so that's why A tier. Pantheon, strong early game, can beat a few champions in the mid lane because of his cheesy factor and being strong in the early game, but in the mid and late game he falls off. To be fair, if you snowball and use Pantheon's ultimate correctly, you can get left and right and impact the map a lot, similar to Twisted Fate. But games after 10 minutes are not looking good for Pantheon. Annie is kind of weak in the early game. In the laning phase especially, she is not good at roaming, but she has very good playmaking potential with the protobot and the ultimate, stunning multiple people and doing tons of damage. And it's pretty easy to get the protobot ultimate onto multiple people. Kayle, I don't know if I should have put a B tier or even C tier. Kayle, very weak in the early game, bad at roaming, but in the mid lane it's easier for her to scale. If you scale, she is super strong, but you can't really roam and you really need just to farm up and be a minion in the early mid game. But later on, she obviously has a lot of damage and she has the ultimate to be invincible. Evelynn, a cheesy mid lane pick that wants to shove in the wave and then try to snowball in the other lanes trying to gank left and right. Cannon doesn't have good wave clear, is weak in the early game against a lot of champions in the mid lane, bad at roaming, kind of squishy, plus his team fight is not that good, to be fair, because his ultimate doesn't do that much damage. And he has to commit, he has to go in with the ultimate. Like, he's one of those champions who has to go in and he is squishy. Plus his ultimate doesn't do that much damage as I would want to. Seraphine, good. I think I can summarize Seraphine and Lux. They're both good poking champions that do decent damage. Seraphine has the ultimate for crowd control, and Lux has the ultimate as a sniping tool and doing tons of damage. But they both have the issue that they are bad roamers that don't really impact the map in the early mid game. And if you are one of those champions, you try to roam or you try to help your teammates. The others are always trying to roam and try to impact the map. And if the one of those assassins is just bush trapping, you go and try to help. Boom, you're dead. And if you don't roam, they just try to gank left and right, joining teamfights while you're just sitting in the mid lane. That's one of those downsides of those poking champions that can't really roam as easily and don't have that much range comparison to a Ziggs and Orianna that provide way more consistent damage and have way more range. Sona is the same. That she is very bad at clearing wave. She's very bad at roaming, and she needs to scale a lot in comparison. And plus, she only has the ultimate as a utility tool. Kai'Sa mid lane is honestly so troll because you guys don't know to make her work. Majority of the times, Kai'Sa just gets punished by every single assassin and a lot of mid laners. She can't roam at all. She needs to scale a lot. And most matchups, she just loses. Next one, Dragon Lane. For the Dragon Lane, in the S+ tier, I have Vayne and Lucian. Main reason is those champions are hyper carry champions with a lot of mobility that makes them hard to kill. That's pretty much it. The other champions in the S tier, I feel like they are easier to kill than a Vayne or Lucian that have way too much mobility. So Vayne has true damage. She has the condemn. She has tumble. So she can just keep tumbling. And tumbling plus ultimate gives her invisibility plus movement speed. And she does tons of damage. So 1v1, you can win against her. In teamfights, she does tons of damage. And she has way too much mobility. So even though she got nerfed, she's still one of the best ADCs in the game. Lucian, on the other hand, he got buffed. His Q got buffed, so it makes him better in the early game. So he can use the first ability more often to poke people down. And like I said, he has tons of damage and tons of mobility. So that's why I put him S+ tier. It's very hard to kill those two champions. If I'm playing a bruiser or an assassin, I would struggle to kill those champions if they are fed and they will just carry the game completely. Kai'Sa got her buff on the third ability. I still think she is one of the best ADCs, but it's not S+ tier because she doesn't have the same movement speed or mobility factor that the other twos have. It's much more easier to kill a Kai'Sa because she only has the ultimate once to dash anywhere, but besides that, she doesn't have that much mobility. Obviously, she has tons of damage. She has stealth. And she is just overall a really solid ADC. Varus has really good crowd control thanks to the ultimate. He has good poking damage. But like I said, he's also good at carrying, like all of those champions in the S tier are good at carrying games. But they kind of don't have the, wow, it's so hard to kill them and they are amazing at carrying and I just can't kill them. They just don't have that factor because I feel like a Varus, even if he's fat, I feel like I can kill him much easier than a Vayne or a Lucian. Obviously, if you have a Varus in the right team comp, it's also becoming hard to reach him, and he has the ultimate as a peeling tool and root a lot of people in a team fight, and he has long range poking damage, so he's very good. Caitlyn, consistent overall from the early game till the late game, a very consistent ADC that does tons of damage, has a lot of range in the early game. Thanks to Stormrazor, she is becoming really, really good. Ziggs, Karma, Orianna, I'm going to summarize. Those three champions are great APCs that do tons of damage consistently. Consistently just because they can poke from long range and it's hard to reach them. Yes, they don't have that much mobility, so you can catch them. But if you, like I said, if they have frontline, might be hard to reach them, and they do consistent a lot of damage. Karma with her poking damage, with the ultimate. She has a root, AoE shield, AoE movement speed. Oriana with the AoE shockwave. Ziggs, tons of damage, and it's very hard to reach him. But to be fair, if you reach him, he doesn't have any escapes. Like, he only has this little bomb, but that's about it. Jin with the storm, I know he got nerfed, but it only is for the monsters, so it doesn't really matter too much for the fourth shot against monsters. But with the Storm Razor and the Energized build, he is in the early game pretty good after the buff he got. And now in the late game, he is also not that bad. Saya, a great self-peeling ADC that does tons of damage. Good, yeah, like I said, self-peel with the ultimate. Has the root to lure people in and then bait them and then root them all. And overall does tons of damage. Corki, tons of damage, good, decent mobility. But he kind of has to, like with the package, you kind of have to commit. Like, you need to find the right angles. It's not as easy to use. And you have 2 dashes in total, while Vayne has infinite, and same for Lucian. But in Dragon Team fights, he is goated. I already explained it for the mid lane. Jinx was the champion. I used to put her lower because she really needed to scale and she wasn't that strong in the early game. But thanks to Stormrazor, she is scaling much more quicker than she used to. And she is just really strong in teamfights. Once she gets a reset, she just wipes everyone in the late game. She does tons of damage. Plus, in combination with a Lulu, she is really, really amazing. Next one is going to be Draven. He's a good, strong, early dominant champion that is great in the laning phase and great at snowballing. But the issue is he just doesn't have the same range, or is kind of short range compared to other ADCs, and he doesn't have any utility plus mobility. So it's easy to kill this champion even if he's fat. Ezreal, not that strong in the early game. He really needs to scale, so that's the downside. But in the late game, once you have enough items, he is hard to kill and does a lot of damage as well. Misfortune, on the other hand, is strong in the early game, has good damage, but in the late game, she doesn't have any mobility abilities, plus she falls off. Tristana, very similar to Jinx, but I still feel like she needs to scale a lot in comparison. Like, she needs like 4 items, but once you have 4 or 5 items, she is very good and does tons of damage. But in the early game, she is really not that strong. Ashe got nerfed a while ago, and early game she is weak. Late game she doesn't do as much damage as other ADCs. She doesn't have mobility. She does have the ultimate as a utility tool to catch people though, to be fair. But I feel like Ashe is better in a pro setting where you can communicate and say, oh, I'm gonna snipe him, go engage, and then the Ashe, I'm gonna land Ashe and then you can commit and engage. So I feel like in pro play, okay, where was I? The recording crashed. I think in pro play, Ashe is better than in solo queue because the communication with the ultimate just works better in pro play than in solo queue. Plus, she just lacks mobility and she also lacks damage in comparison to other ADCs. Brand, just I feel like he doesn't have the much mobility and he doesn't have as much range as the Ziggs or Oriana. So it's easier for you to reach him. So that's why I just put him beta, because he's pretty easy to kill, to be fair. Morgana is like a utility based champion that doesn't provide as much damage and doesn't carry as hard, because all she does is hit the bind, sometimes the soup that doesn't hit motor, doesn't really do that much damage. It's just to proc Liandry's and maybe Airy, and then she has the Black Shield and then the ultimate. So she's like more like a utility based champion. And I feel like in the early game as an APC she is not that good in comparison to a lot of other champions, and in the late game she doesn't provide as much damage as a lot of other champions. So she's not like the typical carry champion, more like a utility-based champion. Veigar as an APC is honestly super weak in the lane, in the early game. Plus he needs to scale. So, I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one, guys. He's just easy to kill, squishy as fuck, doesn't have any mobility, and he needs to scale, and is weak in the early game laning phase. Senna, on the other hand, I feel like she needs to scale a lot, and she is really weak in the early game, and she doesn't do as much damage as a lot of other ADCs. Akshan, then, he is weak in the early game laning phase. His biggest problem is that he is short ranged, and in teamfights, he will always get outranged by a lot of other champions. So he won't do as much consistent damage, because if he comes too close, since he is kind of close range, he will get collapsed on immediately, while other ADCs can do more consistent damage from far away in comparison to an Akshan. So that's why I don't like Akshan as an ADC. Okay, let's get started with supports. For support S+ tier, Yuumi got buffed and she was already broken, Riot. She was already broken, you buffed her even more. She is a permaban in high elo, and this buff makes her... Just ban her. You just need to ban her no matter what. This champion provides tons of healing, shield, movement speed, then has good poke damage, has utility that can root multiple people, and in the early game, which was kinda her... I'm doing this because it wasn't really that of a weakness, but in the early game she was kinda weaker, and in the late game she's scaling like a truck. But now with that buff, buffing the first ability and buffing the passive makes her better in the early game as well. So she is much more dominant in the early game and can poke people and sustain herself up again. So actually trading wise, Yuumi is pretty good. Next one is gonna be Karma. Karma is a great poking champion with tons of utility, having way too much utility, by the way, on a low cooldown. First ability, tons of poke damage. Second ability, a root. Third ability, AoE shield plus movement speed. And ultimate can pull people in a team fight and do tons of damage. As a support, she is really good at carrying games 1 vs 9. That's crazy as a support that you just can do so much value in team fights. Rakan, Alistar, Thresh, and Gragas all have the same in common. They are good playmaking champions in the early game that can snowball and impact on the whole map. And on top of that, they can catch multiple people, have tons of crowd control, and they are great in team fights. Rakan, multiple knock-up plus taunt. Alistar, he has a knock-up on low cooldown that can hit multiple people. He has a stun. He has the ultimate to make himself super tanky as well. Thresh, he has a hook to catch people as a playmaking tool. He has the fling in combination with Protobell to pull people. Then he has the lantern as a utility tool to save people. And he has the ultimate that does damage plus AoE slow. So Thresh, a great playmaking champion in the early game already. Gragas, first ability as poking tool. Second ability makes him more tanky. He takes less damage. Third ability stuns people and you can dash in, catch people. And the ultimate to pull people towards you or push them away. Great utility tool in general. Lulu and Nami are also great enchanters. Lulu, very good in the early game, provides tons of poking damage. She can transform people and silence them pretty much. Third ability provides a shield and movement speed. No. Shield and attack speed? Shield and attack speed, right? And movement speed? I don't even remember anymore. What was it? Attack speed. Attack speed and a shield. No movement speed. Attack speed and a shield. The ultimate gives you, makes your ally big, so they get HP. Plus, around her, everyone is getting slowed. So, good utility value she's providing for your ADC, for example, or for any other hyper carry that can then carry the game even harder. Nami is a great peeler that has good playmaking potential at the same time. She has good poking damage in the early game. She can give attack speed and healing. She has the bubble to knock multiple people up that lasts for an eternity. She has the ultimate as a playmaking tool to knock people up, or as a peel tool to pretty much push them away, and the others can just escape since they're getting knocked up. Then Janna is very similar to Lulu and Nami, but she doesn't provide the same playmaking potential. She has a tornado that can knock people up, but it's not as accurate as Nami bubble. Plus, it doesn't last as long. Second ability is good in the early game as a poking tool. Third ability provides AD and a shield, and the ultimate is great as a peeling tool in a team fight. But like I said, not the same playmaking potential or the same utility value as the other twos. Now Galio, Leona, and Braum are pretty similar, that they are great or decent playmaking champion, but the issue is either it's not as easy for them to hit multiple people. For example, for Galio, it's not as easy for him to hit multiple people with the taunt, like reach them. As a Alistar, for example, it's much easier for him to reach multiple people since he can just use WQ. While Galio, you can use the dash that is kind of delayed. You go back a bit and then forth. Plus, usually you need to combine with Proto Build or you use with Flash, while an Alistar is way easier to execute that combo to hit multiple people. But Galio obviously has the AoE taunt, he has the global ultimate to join team fights and knock people up, so that's great, and he has good poking damage. Leona has stun on her, I think, first ability. It's not that long and it's only on a single target. She is a decent playmaker for like catching one single target, like third ability in, then stun them, and the ultimate can stun multiple people, but it's not, first of all, not as accurate, and also the stun is on the ultimate, so other champions can, like Rakan or Alistar, can use their engages even without the ultimate, or can hit multiple people. Braum has a single target stun if the target gets hit 3 times. He has decent peeling or decent shield factor, thanks to his shield that can block or reduce damage from projectiles. Then he has the ultimate as a peeling and playmaking ability, which is pretty good. Seraphine and Sona, I think I rate them higher now than I used to, thanks to Trottles, because I see the potential that they can do, and they also work in this meta much better because having AP damage is pretty good when everyone is just stacking Death Dance, for example. One good ultimate by Seraphine can turn a team fight, charming multiple people in doing tons of damage, and Seraphine overall in the mid and late game does a lot of damage, but you definitely need a frontliner for you in those team fights. Same applies for Sona, but Sona is more scaling. But once she's like 3-4 items, she has a lot of utility and the ultimate to stun multiple people. Lux is not a good peeler, or she is not the typical enchanter. She's a damage dealing support. She's really reliant on having the right team combo. Like, you need frontline, and if you don't have frontline, you don't really have peel, you just have one bind, and then otherwise you just have damage dealing tools. She does have a little bit of shield, but pretty much just bad peeler for your ADC. Plus, if you don't have a tank, then your team comp is very squishy, and is pretty easy to kill a Lux in team fights, to be fair. Shen has decent playmaking potential thanks to his taunt, and he has the ultimate to join team fights plus give a shield to your ally. But he's very squishy as a support since you don't have that much items, and he's weak in the early game at the same time. Set also has good playmaking potential thanks to his third ability and ultimate, but it's not that easy for him to reach people without a proto belt. Plus, without items, he is really not that tanky as a support. Plus, on top of that, he is weak in the early game, I would say, if you're playing against champions that can just poke him down. Plus, he got nerfed. Plus, plus, plus. And there's so much downside on a set, to be fair, as a support. I really don't like set as a support. Morgana, I feel like, just doesn't provide the same value as a peeling champion as other enchanters. Yes, she has a bind. She has a black shield that can block one crowd control, and she has the ultimate to stun multiple people. But the second ability is useless pretty much as a support, since it does 0 damage. And if you guys miss the bind, you are completely useless. And the bind is like on a high cooldown and only on one target. And in the early game, in the laning phase, she is really weak. Singe is a cheesy playmaking support that I think is kind of underrated, because he can catch a lot of people and has amazing playmaking potential thanks to his third ability in combination with Protobell to catch people off guard. If you use the second ability beforehand, they can't use any mobility abilities. They can't flash out, they can't dash out, and then you can catch them pretty easily. And then in the mid-late game, he is really strong since he's scaling. To be fair, in the early game, in the laning phase, he is really weak because you can just punish him if you keep your distance and just poke him down. Annie in the early game is really weak. She is kind of scaling and she has good playmaking potential. No peeling factors, to be fair. But she has a Protobell ultimate combo that can stun a lot of people and be a game or teamfight changer. Soraka as an enchanter, I don't think she's that good in the meta because everyone is running anti-heal right now. And without, like, she won't heal as much, she has a silence, she doesn't have mobility, and she doesn't have any peel for your ADC. So I feel like if you guys don't have a tank, then it's just GG, go next. Amumu, Malphite both have the same explanation. They are both early game weak. They don't provide any peeling. They don't provide any utility pretty much. And they only have the ultimate to do something. And that's about it. Without ultimates, they're useless, both of them. Pantheon in the early game, kinda cheesy pick. He needs to snowball. If he doesn't, he's completely useless. And he doesn't have any peel. Plus, yeah, otherwise he doesn't provide anything. He can stun people and then try to hard. Like, you need to brute force or snowball, and if you guys don't do, then he's completely useless. Mundo is one of those champions that is useless. He's just a meat shield that doesn't provide anything besides using Cleaver as his only crowd control, like slowing people down. He's weak in the early game, and everyone is running anti-heal anyway, so he's kinda useless. Senna players are selfish players that pick her into the wrong team comps, Most of the times, you won't have a tank, you have double ADC, you're very squishy, she's not good at peeling for your ADC, and usually Senna players are inting, they build full crit, they take the farm of your ADC as well, and then all they do is feeding. That's about it. That's my experience, and I feel like if I ask 10 other players, they will also agree with the fact that most Senna players are just complete useless. I think in the right team comp she can be valuable, but most Senna players are very bad. Next one is going to be Blitzcrank, and Blitzcrank players are hit or miss. There are some Blitzcrank players that are amazing because they're hitting key targets, and if they hit key targets like enemy ADC or enemy mage, they can be really, really valuable. But most Blitzcrank players, they don't know how to hook, and if they hook someone, they hook the wrong people. And if you don't know to hook, like if you can't hook someone or if you can't hook a key target, Blitzcrank is pretty much a useless champion. So that's why I just put him C tier, because he's so inconsistent. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list, and I hope you guys appreciate the fact that I'm recording this for the third time, actually. This part, the support part, for the third time. But in general, the tier list for the second time, because the first recording crashed. Talking 1 hour already, my voice is dying. But if you guys appreciate the fact, leave a like definitely, so you guys can see that you guys enjoyed this tier list and you guys want to see more. Write down your feedback below in the comments what champions you guys like, what champions you guys think I plays good, or what champions you would change. But anyways, this is my subjective tier list and my personal opinion, what champions I think are good as a challenger player. listen to Professor Breaker. By the way, this is not only for high elo, this also applies for low elo. Champions in S plus tier are also amazing in low elo, by the way. The only issue is maybe Yumi. I think Yumi can work in low elo also, but obviously in high elo or with a dual Q, she works better. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you next time. Bye bye.
Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.